Okay, in this lesson, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to learn how to complete the square. Okay, completing the square is a process that creates perfect square trinomials. Okay, and perfect square trinomials are ones that factor just like all of these, the way these look in that first section. So if they factor to two of the same thing that we can then write as a single binomial squared, that's a perfect square trinomial. So what we first want to do is we kind of want to figure out what pattern all these perfect square trinomials have. Okay, so here's what you need to do. You need to first square each of these binomials in the first section. You do that by changing out the squared and just writing two of the same parentheses, not one with a plus, one with a minus, both the same symbol, either 2 plus or 2 minus, like these will all have 2 minus, and then you multiply it out. I can kind of quickly do that in my head. I'm going to get x squared from the first two. I'm going to get two 7x's, that's going to make 14x. I'm going to get a 49 at the end. Why don't you multiply out B, C, D, and E, pause, and then come back. Okay, so for this one you should have had x squared plus 18x plus 81. This one you should have had x squared minus 20x plus 100. For D you should have had x squared minus 8x plus 16. And for E, x squared minus 12x plus 36. What's awesome is that there is a relationship between the x coefficient and the coefficient, oops, sorry, that should have been a plus at the end there, and the coefficient at the end of the problem, okay? Think for a second, what's the relationship between that middle coefficient and the last coefficient in all of these problems? Hopefully what you've come up with is that if you take half of it and then multiply it by itself or square it, half of the middle coefficient squared is the last coefficient. And that makes sense, right? Because this came from two 7s. So two 7s created the 14, and then 7 times 7 created the 49. So if you divide it by 2, you figure out what this number is that got repeated. And then if you multiply it by itself, you get that last number. Okay? So what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to put numbers in the blanks here all the way up through G that make it a perfect square trinomial. And then what I want you to do is actually factor it. So let me show you what I'm going to quickly do what the first two should look like. So I'm thinking, again, I need two of the exact same thing. So two of the same number that create 4 would be 2 and 2. So then if I multiplied that out, I'd get x squared plus 2x to make the 4x, and then plus 4 at the end. So this needs to be a plus 4. So really what I did is I took 4 divided by 2. I got 2. I squared it, and I got 4. This factors into x plus 2 times x plus 2, or x plus 2 squared. Looking at B, two of the same number that make negative 6 are negative 3 and negative 3. That's the only way I can use two of the same number. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, plus 9. See how it's always a plus? Or if you want to think of it this way, I took negative 6 divided by 2, got negative 3, and then I squared it, including the negative, and I got 9. When I factor this, I get x minus 3 times x minus 3, or x minus 3 squared. Try this all the way up through G, okay? I'll explain them in detail, so if you get to one that you really can't do, you can kind of unpause and check your answer one at a time. That would probably be a good way to go about doing the rest of these. So do as many as you can, pause, come back, and try figuring these out on your own as much as you can. Okay, so for C, two of the same number that make 10 are 5. Okay, 5 and 5 will make 10. And 5 times 5 is 25. So 25 goes there. And I get x plus 5 times x plus 5, or x plus 5 squared. Two of the same number that make negative 2. That would be negative 1 and negative 1. Okay? Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So 1 goes here. Hopefully you can get to the point, this factors as x minus 1 squared then. Hopefully you can get to the point where you can kind of do this in your head a little bit until we get to the really tricky ones on the back. Okay? So let's look at E. E, two of the same number that make 9 are 4.5 and 4.5. Okay? Now this is not one that I would necessarily expect that you would be able to do in your head. So if you've got a calculator, that would certainly be really helpful. So go to your calculator, figure out what 4.5 times 4.5 is. I'm going to do the same right now because I honestly don't feel like writing all that out. So 4.5 times 4.5 is 20.25. So that's the number that goes here. And when you factor it, you see, all you got to remember is that those are the two of the same number that you used. So it's going to be x plus 4.5 times itself, or squared. Two of the same number that create negative 2.8 or negative 1.4. Negative 1.4 times negative 1.4. Well, 14 times 14 is about 196 or so. So this is going to be 1.96. And I get x minus 1.4 squared. Last one, now we're just getting into really gross stuff here. So two of the same number that create 0.9 are 0.45 and 0.45. Those add to be 9. So now I got to multiply 0.45 times 0.45 to figure out what the last number is. And I'm going to get the same numbers as I did up here, but with the decimal place moved 2 back. So 0.2025, and that's x plus 0.45 squared. So what you're going to be expected to do on the practice problems, it only says complete the square, figure out what number completes the square. I want you to actually do the factoring too, because that's going to be the natural next step anyway. So the decimal ones are tricky, but again, in the end, since you're trying to create the same thing times itself, you just look for what two of the same number add to be that number, and then multiply them together to create the last one. Okay? Give some practice problems a try, take a concept quiz. Good luck.